Good afternoon, everybody. This afternoon's proceedings are being live streamed on the live link, but after a 15-minute delay, those with mobile telephones may use them to report what they hear in the hearing room, but only after 15 minutes have elapsed since the event that they're reporting. They may not be used for recording or photography.
I wonder if we can bring up on screen, please, MPS 0527597, so your tab B8. Mr. McKinney, we're returning to the Tradecraft Manual, but there's a section I want to ask you about, you've already alluded to, in relation to arrests of UCOs. It's page 28, paragraph 5.8.1.
So if you could repeat the number, please, sorry.
5.8.
It's come up now.
Yes, 5.
Thank you.
So here it begins, it's becoming more and more likely that an SDS operative will face arrest during his or her tour. With the change in public order legislation following the introduction of the Criminal Justice and Public Order Act 1994, we will all face the real possibility of arrest, from simple fly posting up to recordable criminal offences such as criminal trespass, assault or burglary. Additionally, the chance of being fitted up by unscrupulous officers is a real, if rare, event. Thankfully, senior management seem prepared to grasp this nettle and appear prepared to support an operative through such an eventuality. So again, given the age of this Tradecraft Manual, talking about the likelihood that UCOs will from time to time become arrested. In terms of, I wonder if we can zoom out again. The following paragraph goes to the next stage, or stages after arrest, because it says 5.8.2, one bone of contention is that if arrested, one should plead guilty and cop the fine. And then it refers to groups such as the Hunt Saboteurs, and the ALF will not accept such an approach to arrest in the current climate and expect a colleague to plead not guilty, fight the case strongly, and if the case is won, the arresting officer's force will face a claim for compensation in the civil court. More and more groups are following this tendency, and unless you intend to fail to appear at court, management should support the field officer's appraisal of the situation. Each case must be looked at on its merits, so do not expect that you will be able to follow a course of action which will be accepted by your wearies. Now, in terms of the reference to arrest and participation in court proceedings, was your view that there was an important distinction between arrest and anything further, i.e. the charge, that there was a possibility, if not a probability, that UCOs would be arrested, but your concern was that it not move to the charge stage, is that right?
My view is that every UCO should make sure that they don't get arrested in the first place. And there again, in some of the examples I've given, even low-level criminality, they should find every reason not to be involved in low-level criminality. Any form of arrest made of a UCO is going to lead to a great and heightened risk of compromise. And therefore, in the first place, my view is the arrest should never take place. It could, however, take place. And unless you're going to take me to the example of Hastings, I don't know if you're going to.
Well, perhaps before, if we take this document down, before moving on to Hastings, just because you do address this topic in your statement, so may I just bring that up on screen just to assist. It's page 52, please, in Mr. McKinney's statement. It's paragraphs 234.5 and 0.6, and we'll do the same thing. We'll bring them up on screen. So 4 lines down, you do say the ultimate aim of the process would have been to ensure that the arrested UCO was not charged with a criminal offence and there was no interference with the legal process. I would have expected SDS junior managers to understand how to manage arrests, as this, in my view, is a basic requirement for anyone involved in the management of undercover operations.
So the first part is don't get arrested. Second part is if you are arrested, that needs to be managed heavily. Now, in the case of a public order demonstration, which is, I think, the example you're going to go to, it becomes even more so important that the SDS unit, stroke via Intel, should be linking in with Gold for that particular operation to understand what Gold's strategy is going to be if arrests are made, or kettling, or anything such as that. If that happens, they need to be on top of that scenario to prevent, if it has been an arrest, to inform Gold straight away in order that that can be managed, that it does not lead to a charge. Because the worst thing we can do is ever mislead a court.
And which you state clearly here, you say what to do if brought before a court, whether as a defendant or a witness. A UCO should never be required to appear before a court in their covert identity.
Absolutely.
Either as a defendant or a witness, because the court should not be misled about the identity of the individual who appears in front of them. If it does happen, the appearance of the UCO needs to be managed in collaboration with the CPS. I would have expected this to be well known to UCOs and to senior junior management. Were you aware before Hastings, which we will come to, were you aware of any historic arrest or charge or participation in court proceedings by UCOs in the SDS beforehand?
I was aware of arrests, but I was not aware of court proceedings.
For example, how would that have come to your attention?
I think I recall when I took over the G8 protest in, the G8 in Scotland, I have a feeling a couple of the officers were detained temporarily, but it didn't lead to any formal charge. And I presume, because I wasn't there at the time, wasn't the DCI, but I presume it was well managed with the Scottish force.
Just before lunch, when we were looking at that audit of SDS finances document and the balance sheet not matching discrepancy of about £9,000, and I was asking you about, well, did that really contribute to the closure of the SDS? And you indicated that by that stage it was symptomatic. There was yet another thing that you were finding wrong with the SDS. At this stage, so this is in 2007, had your attitude moved from trying to make it the most elite undercover unit in the country? Had your thinking about the SDS moved to such an extent that it was beyond saving?
No, I was very led by sort of my conversations with Frankie, and we still felt, and Frankie convinced me, and I took his advice and guidance because he was very well placed to give it, that we were making inroads and change was occurring and happening. It just so happened at the same time I get that financial audit, which is worrying, and then I get this arrest. And for me, this arrest really became a significant issue between myself and HN72, because I'm thinking I should have the most able DI who should be able to manage this process. This wasn't a minor public order, so it's not what's described in the tradecraft. This is a major policing event in London that has happened for many, many years, and therefore SO, I think it was SB at the time, or SO15, heavily embedded with CO11 in supporting that operation. I would expect that the risk management of the deployment of Hastings at that demonstration would have been, one, full knowledge of what his deployment was, what his use and conduct was, and full instructions to Hastings as to what he could do and what he couldn't do. And I know that I think it's HN, the cover officer, states that she did give him advice and guidance about what he could and couldn't do. But even then, to have known that the arrest took place and then to take the view to let it take its own course, I found to be a major failure. And I know that he comes up with the rationale of trying to inform me in order to manage that process, but I would have expected an officer of his experience and knowledge to know that regardless, you need to make urgent contact with Gold at the very least. One, I think Gold should have been told an undercover officer was deployed anyway. But secondly, once it happened, I think you should have made urgent contact with Gold. I know that he took the view that he had briefed I think the Intel inspector currently embedded with CO, but I think it was his officer, one of our UCOs, he should have gripped this with far more grip than happened.
Was this event not so much the arrest, but the charge of Rob Hastings? Was that the straw for you that broke the SDS camel's back? Was that
Not
the
the
last
final straw? No, it wasn't the final straw, because Frankie and I still felt that, okay, we had a meeting with the DI. I obviously explained to the DI my reservations and concerns around how he had managed this. I can't remember if I'd also raised the covert finance business. I can't remember. He told me that if he felt that I no longer had his confidence, then he didn't want to continue to work on the unit. I admitted to him he no longer had my confidence. That was not the straw that broke the final camel's back, because we still felt, okay, we can bring in another DI, we can still carry on this journey.
I want to go through the events in a little more detail, but before I do, to what extent, looking back, did the arrest and charge of DC Hastings contribute to the ending of the SDS?
It didn't contribute to the ending. It was yet another significant incident that made me question the way the SDS were continuing to operate. When I phoned up Gold, who was a very respected Gold commander, he was as shocked that this had happened as I was shocked that it had happened, and couldn't believe that he had not been informed.
Let's turn to what happened. We just started. The arrest took place on the 11th of September 2007. If we just go back a few days before then, wonder if we can turn up, please, MPS 0076134. This is document cert, your tab B76. So these are notes made by HN30, and I'm going to ask if we can turn to page 6 of this document here. So here, DSEI 2007, Convergence Centre, proposal to gain entrance to unoccupied premises to be used as a convergence centre. On Sunday, the 2nd of September 2007, DS HN35 was contacted by Commonweal, CW is Commonweal, which is HN18, it's Rob Hastings, who informed him that in connection with DSEI 2007, Privacy had asked him to accompany him to secure unoccupied premises somewhere in East London, which would then be used as a squat convergence centre for the duration of the DSEI protest during next week. DS HN35 contacted by phone DCI Flood to inform him of this information. DCI Flood said that he would discuss with Commonweal the parameters of his authority with regard to his proposal. Okay, so we have the 2nd of September 2007. So this is not an event that comes out of thin air. We have the planning of it being clearly communicated, and DCI Flood is being informed of the information, certainly at this stage. Why lay the blame at the door of, say, HN72, for example, as opposed to DCI Flood, who, after all, was the DCI at the time?
Sorry, I don't understand the point you're trying to ask me. Perhaps I've misheard.
So criticism of HN72,
right.
He shouldn't have allowed this to have happened. The arrest, and let alone charge of Rob Hastings should never have been allowed to happen.
Right.
And we can see that, in fact, in the days leading up to the attempt to gain access to the Convergence Centre, that the planning of it is being communicated and being passed on to DCI Flood. And my question is, why does HN72 attract the blame for what happened as opposed to, for example, DCI Flood?
Because HN72 was the operational lead that was contacted when Hastings was arrested, DCI Flood was not around at that time, and I don't know why, and I can't remember why.
Is it possible that he was on leave
I
during
don't
the
know,
immediate
but
time?
I remember Frankie was not about when the DI came to see me or phoned me on the phone to explain what had happened. Because if you read my notes, it's quite clear that I'm dealing with the initial fallout of this. And then, but I can't, this is so long ago.
Let's go to your notes because that
Okay.
will assist. If we could turn up, please, MPS 0526 774, so your tab B71. And if we can turn to page 2 of this document. So DC Hastings arrested with others on the 11th of September 2007, which was a Tuesday. Now, in relation to this document here, so 12th of September 2007, is this at the top, is this your handwriting?
Looks like my handwriting, yes.
So we've got Arms Fair, DSEI,
Yep,
Royal Victoria Dock, SOE State of Emergency Group,
Yes, sounds
infiltrated by Commonweal. Saturday night, CW obtains intel that the group would try get into the Excel Centre Tuesday.
Yep.
Sunday, the 9th of September, he is to go to a squat with other activists.
Right.
And
On Tuesday, arrested at 8 a.m. in the car park of the Excel Centre. Aggravated trespass, 18 arrested in total, 3 for breach of the peace. This is obviously what I'm being told. I presume this is by the DI. And these are the notes I'm making. Then DI HN72 aware of arrest at 10:30 a.m. on Tuesday. Charged to be at court that night. And then I obviously say these are my directions as at 5 p.m.
so just so we understand this document, so you're recording here what you're being told by
That's my
by-
reflection, as clear as I can make it, is I'm making notes of what I'm being told.
So you're
I can't tell you what time I'm doing it in the day, but it's obviously during the day I'm making those notes.
So in terms of doing the best you can, looking back from this distance of time, the top bit is what you've been told by DI HN72, and then
I'm giving directions.
Your directions.
And I think my directions are debrief, evidential incident, CW to be pulled back from any more active participation, but remain enrolled with phone calls, full report and disclosure to the Crown Prosecution Service, and then obviously to be informed on Thursday morning. I think that is the authorising officer. I'm not sure. And then obviously Mr. Boucher to be informed tonight. I want a review of the risk assessment and decision logs with taskings given.
Now, and we'll go over to the next page, but so one of the first directions that you give is for full report and full disclosure to be provided to the Crown Prosecution Service.
Yes.
Could we turn over the page, please? And again, if we can just expand it to help us read through this. So then it's
8 a.m. the following morning.
Yeah.
I briefed Commander McDowell. Additional directions which I presume Commander McDowell gave me. Obtain copy of arrest notes re CW. Obtain copy of any CCTV. Brief, obviously, Commander K. the Gold. And book appointment for Monday to see Crown Prosecution caseworker with Frankie Flood.
So in terms of your involvement in the response to Hastings' arrest, you are, as soon as you've become aware of it, involved in the day-to-day detail of it.
I'm rushing to get a grip of it as fast as I possibly can.
How, perhaps worry is the wrong word, but how worried were you, how concerned were you that this had happened and here you are dealing with it? At the time you're writing these notes, what was going through your mind?
What's going in my mind is that, one, we've got the officer arrested and the possible compromise of the officer through this arrest. Two, we must tell the Crown Prosecution Service urgently because he has now entered the judicial process. And therefore my real worry is that we're going to mislead a court at this stage. And I really want to alert the Crown Prosecution Service as soon as possible in order that I can manage the process through them.
And we can see, and you time it, for example, 12 noon, Commander K will get a copy of the arrest notes, 4 p.m. CPS message left to ring you back. And if we turn over the page, please. And again, expand.
Yep.
That, so 14th of September. And again, just to...
Okay, lunchtime on the Tuesday, I was informed. Okay.
Yeah. So again, this is your handwriting. This is your close to contemporaneous notes of what happened.
Yeah, I'm writing down what I'm thinking here, which is I've obviously questioned command and control. Issues, sit tight and let events take their course. And danger in making inquiries. So for me, I'm seeing that as an issue. I don't think you should have sat tight and let events take their course. I think you should have made the inquiries. I think you should have gone straight to Gold and made those inquiries urgently through Gold's direction.
So when your notes record sit tight and there's danger in making inquiries, you're saying this is not necessarily your views, it might be...
I think it's the issues I'm identifying. I'm sort of going... I'm trying to remember going back that far, but I think what I'm saying is issues. I'm highlighting the issue. And the issue for me is sit tight and let events take their course. And danger in making inquiries, I'm saying I don't agree with that, because I think what I'm doing there is writing down what I was told by the DI as that was his course of action. And that for me is an issue.
Now, if we just turn over the page, page 5, I think we're on, please, thanks. And so we can see you set out here that HN72 decides to find out who in the CPS to deal with. Is this reacting to the situation in fast times, scrabbling around to try and save the situation?
I'm not sure what he's trying to do here, because I remember thinking, well, what is a hidden way? Talk to CPS and advise to contact CPS. My view is we need to get straight into this. All this hidden way, SO15 prosecutions, etc. We need to fast time manage this issue. And my view is that what has happened now. We now need to prevent the court from being misled, and we need to literally, as soon as we possibly can, brief the Crown Prosecution Service as to what our problem is.
Now,
and I don't like this hidden way, and I don't like let it take its course.
So was that the discourse between you and 72, you wanting to be open and contacting the CPS, and HN72 pushing against that, or was it?
I don't think he was not pushing against it, because I don't remember him pushing against it. At this stage, he has done what he has done. I'm writing down the issues, and my big issue is you should not have let this which is what I wrote down issue before, let it take its course. That should never have happened. What this prosecution's hidden way is, I don't know what you're talking, that shouldn't be happening. We need to be getting the Crown Prosecution Service informed as soon as possible. And I'm looking at different ways of doing it, contacting CPS lead through bronze crime. But again, we're trying not to alert everybody, which is why I'm dealing direct in my phone calls with Gold Joe K.
So even if we look at the penultimate bullet point where it says, regardless of arrest strategy, they would still remain with sit-tight policy even in hindsight. Is that a discussion point?
That's what they're saying. And I'm going, you don't sit tight.
I think we've reached the end of this document, but it's not the end of your notes. We might need to... Can we just check there's nothing further on the following page? No. Could we then move... Could we take this document down and we continue your notes on another document, so it's your tab B74. Could we turn up MPS 0526773? And if we turn to the second page, so we're still...
This is Frankie's writing.
Okay. So 17th of September is the date, and we can see...
I remember going.
You and your name and Frankie Flood's name there, and it refers to a meeting.
Yes.
So at this stage, and do you remember there's a meeting held at Snaresbrook?
I remember going to Snaresbrook Crown Court with Frankie, and I remember meeting a representative of the Crown Prosecution Service. And obviously there's a few redactions there.
There are a few redactions because no decision made at this time.
Yep.
I was to provide, and again, we remind ourselves this is Frankie Flood's handwriting.
Yes.
So it's Frankie Flood. I was to provide details of the names of all persons charged with this offence of aggravated trespass and the reference number of the case. And if we can just turn over the page, please. And again, Frankie Flood's handwriting, 18th of September, following day. The details of the persons arrested were emailed through. This was later found out, did not.
Frankie's handwriting.
Not received. And then the 19th of September, Wednesday, spoke to Redacted to resend the list of persons arrested. So it seems to have been a problem sending that list through. Together with the authority for the deployment of Commonweal, this was hand-delivered. Likely will be request for an adjournment. And then we move to the 20th of September, discussion about court. I will attend there on Friday. So again, in terms of the attention this was receiving, Frankie Flood attending.
He's taking the lead now.
21st of September, case adjourned until the 5th of October. Conditions changed, so reference to bail conditions. Require meeting with Redacted next week, re-matter. And if we just turn over the page, please. So 28th of September, further meeting, both of you present, situation explained in keeping with the report. Detective Superintendent McKinney presented the case and a copy of the report was given to Redacted for his papers.
Yep.
He requires a debrief of the UCO. Now, pausing there, we know and we have interview transcripts where Rob Hastings was interviewed at length.
Yes.
And so that is the debrief referred to there, and report to me with him first thing Monday morning around the following grounds as listed and attend instructions to debriefing team. So this is the 28th of September, and I wonder if we can just go over the page. If there's any further note. If we have to move to another document just to continue the chronology, could we take that down and move to MPS 0749169, which is your tab B55. So again, are we looking at DCI Flood's notes rather than yours?
Yes.
And this is in relation to we've now moved on to the 12th of October.
I don't know who we're meeting here, is it? Outline.
So if we look at the top of it, so it's a meeting at 10:35 in the morning. It is you, DCI Flood, and DIHN 72.
Okay, sorry, this is a meeting with, okay.
This is the meeting that you already touched on, and we'll get to the point about confidence, but I want to go through this. So outline of the circumstances of the arrest of Commonweal, and then circumstances HN 72 in charge.
I think what he's writing down here is outline the circumstances of the arrest of CW. So the circumstances, and then in charge experience of dealing with this. I think obviously that's one of the areas that Frankie's obviously written down. CW worked very well, so what we're saying is CW has worked well. HM was happy to work. Oh, that's right. So he's writing down, I think the notes is the DI is telling us that he's happy to wait in the background for the outcome of the arrest without any intervention. Rationale is not to inform a lot of people. And then prosecution unit, bronze crime, CPS high level. So I think he's writing, the way Frankie was probably right, he's writing down the issues, but he's obviously writing down some directions at the same time.
So at this, do you have a memory now, looking back of this meeting? Is this something that you can remember?
I can't remember it in detail, but I remember Frankie and I meeting the DI, Frankie writing the notes. I think I'm doing most of the talking. So I think what Frankie's trying to do is make notes of my conversation. I think what I'm doing is probably highlighting to the DI that Commonweal found himself being arrested. I understand that. However, it's the circumstances of charge that I'm more worried about, and I'm really concerned about the weight in the background for things to happen, and the rationale not to inform a lot of people. And there's obviously interruptions, so I presume the DI is telling me about the prosecution unit, bronze crime. So yeah, I'm talking through it with him.
And if we look at the bottom of that page, I wonder if we can zoom out there.
Implications of... Sorry, I'm trying to read Frankie's writing there. View of senior CPS lawyer. I'm trying to see what that word is. I don't know if you can help me.
Implications of solicitors being informed. Only DPP can make a decision.
I presume that's what the senior CPS lawyer is saying.
So you're setting out the circumstances that we're aware of. And if we can look at the penultimate line there, HN72 agreed it was a fuck-up.
Yep.
And then, so this is something, it's in inverted commas, something that he said to you.
Yep, in the meeting.
In effect, accepting a level of responsibility, or that something had gone wrong.
What's over the page?
Well, before that, the last line is, it appears to be, and wonder if you can help us with this, you or Frankie Flood asking, were you let down by the UCO? And then the answer to that in the next page
is
no.
Right.
And he stated that he was in charge of the sergeants.
Yep.
So is this HN72 accepting responsibility for ultimately what happened?
It appears to me that's what he's saying. He's saying it was his fuck up. He's not blaming the UCO. He states he was in charge of the sergeants. Anything with regards to him was his responsibility, and he agreed he could have been better briefed and more robust in the questioning of the sergeants. No other issues with regards to SDS, so he is taking responsibility for the action.
Now, we can see as that goes down, towards the bottom of the page, a reference to you, Mr. McKinney, Mr. Stair, a change of topic, because it says there, Mr. McKinney then raised issues as a result of a report from Laurie Ford.
Because I think the dates are fairly close together. I think the result of Laurie Ford was, you can remind me, you've probably got the document, the date of that to the date of this. I think, from memory, I think they're quite close.
So was this not just about the particular circumstances and the problems with the arrest of Hastings, but really this meeting, was it focused on HN72?
No, it was about, one, talking through the arrest and what had happened, and obviously I wanted the DI's version of events. Remind me of the date of the Laurie Ford, but I have a feeling it was there, and I think that then led my conversation on to say, well, look, not only am I concerned about what's happened here, but I'm also now concerned about the financial audit that's taken place. That's my memory, as best it can. And then I'm not too sure, something said it was, HN72 said it was to a person, not to...
This is in relation to fleet vehicle numbers.
Oh, okay.
But then it goes on, then I'm grateful that the Laurie Ford audit, just for time, was July 2007.
Okay.
So
when did I receive the report? I'm not too sure. The audit was July. I'm not sure where I got it.
And these notes that we're looking at, this meeting that we're looking at, the meeting notes, this is 12th of October 2007, so a number of months after that.
Yeah, but I'm not sure when I got the report. The inspection might be July, but it might have been some time till I got the report. I don't know.
There's then reference to use of credit cards,
okay,
and the detail of that.
That's probably more led by Frankie then, because I don't remember the great detail in relation to Laurie Ford's financial audit, because I'd spoken to Frankie about it, so that could be him leading on that part of the conversation. I'm happy I led on the earlier conversation, but on the credit card bit.
And really detailed questions about whether the UCOs were using their own cards for filling up petrol. But if we just turn over the page, please, just moving on with this meeting here. There's reference, we can see a quarter of the way down to the missing £9,000 that's also discussed here.
Okay.
And then can you see towards the bottom of our screen, can you see it says
Julian.
Talking about you raising the topic of, I think it's the word confidence.
Yeah.
Julian then talked about confidence and asked HN72 what he thought. And then this description of him, does this paint a picture of the way in which he was responding to you and Frankie Flood? He again went round and around.
I think I'm now, this is memory, and I want to be as accurate as I possibly can. I think I'm now talking about my confidence in the DI. I'm now saying, this is my memory, I'm not happy with the way in which you've managed the arrest, and I'm concerned about your management style in relation to the money issue. I don't think these are discipline offences. I think these are just management capability issues. And I think because I've probably used the word confidence, I think he then leads on to say, well, if you've lost confidence in me, then more or less he's happy to leave.
And the notes say he asked you if he had confidence in him, and he said he had not.
I agree. That's my recollection.
And then the next entry is, as that was the case, HN72 said he would not wish to be in a unit where there was not confidence in his position. He would leave, and this was
agreed. And we then facilitated a move for him.
And I wonder if you can just scroll down for the rest of this document. If there are any further notes. Now, at here, say he says, well, do you have any confidence in me? You say no, and he agrees to leave. And then this, it says, so he was told that Andy Horsley would be taking over as of Monday.
Absolutely.
How was it that...
It was in my mind that we were building up to a conversation, and I wanted to be absolutely sure that if it resulted in me not having a DI, because at this stage, I know this unit is going through some difficulties, and we need a DI if suddenly the DI moves. This was not the first time that I'd faced a near rebellion by a unit on SO15, and I won't go into that in stray, but I was not going to be held to ransom by a DI suddenly saying they're going and leaving me vulnerable. So I'd made...
How specific can you be about what it is that made you lose confidence in HN72? What was it that...
I think it was a culmination of a long period of time and a number of issues. My view of HN72 is that he is a very, very experienced officer and a really nice person. However, on arrival, I had tried to manage a number of processes within MPS policy. One you may touch on later, which was an officer who was deciding that he wanted to go to a particular posting. This could not be worked out. I tried to get the DI to understand why we had to comply. I felt I was being isolated, and it was ending up with a me against the UCOs rather than the DI understanding his responsibility was mine in managing post-deployments in line with MPS policy. I also felt as we went along was the financial issue, and then culminating in this, I just felt that HN72 just did not want to move through the change and was being obstructive.
Because we considered the time, in fact, it took for DCI flood to be in place. It took a while, a number of months.
Yes.
For that position to be filled. But in terms of Andy Horsley, does that suggest that from quite a lot earlier, before this meeting on the 12th of October 2007, that you had been making inquiries who's the most appropriate person to have someone? Could you help us with the
I
timing?
don't think it's a period of time. I mean, I can't remember the specifics. I knew Andy Horsley. I think Frankie knew Andy Horsley. I have a feeling he was on one of the units within my command, but I'm trying to go back a long period of time. So it was simple for me to move people around my own particular command. And I think whether we chatted about it just before, what happens if he decides that he wants to tell us he no longer wants to be on the unit, what do we do then? We've got all the UCOs. I can't remember if it was like a couple of days before or the day before or moments before this meeting. But yes, I accept I had a reserve plan.
Now, in terms of the communication of that, we can see some reference to it here, sort of in the middle of this page. Can you see it says, I discussed with HN72, it's difficult to, I'm not sure the next word, him to tell the staff without me being present on the Monday. So the discussion with HN72 pertaining to how this is communicated.
I think that's probably Frankie. I don't know if it was HN72's wish that he wanted to tell the staff he was going. I can't honestly recall.
And then I, being Frankie Flood, I pointed out he must tell them the truth, as I will not mislead them, and it would be disrespectful to them to do it any other way. I agreed with him. He left as a result of confidence and the way he handled the arrest of Rob Hastings. He would then meet me after Monday meeting. I would see the cover covers afterwards.
That's correct.
Could you help us with what your recollection is of the reaction to this? So this is a DI that had been in the SDS in situ for a number of years. What was the reaction of the UCOs and the managers to this?
I can't remember the specifics, but I have a recollection they were not happy.
Just in some of the sergeants, we have some of their descriptions in their statements, and I just want to, so HN30, the way in which he described HN72, he says, my impression was that he was well respected by the UCOs. I considered that HN72 was very supportive of me. Does that chime with the way in which he got on, at least with the sergeants, from your...
He had a very, very good working relationship with the sergeants and the UCOs.
And so just, again, for completeness, just two other sergeants. So HN24, his description is, I got on well with 72. He was a strong personality. And he...
Mind if I just look up?
Yes.
So it was HN.
So the first one that I read the quote from was HN30, and then now reading a quote from paragraph 46 of HN24's statement.
Thank you.
So he says, I got on well with HN72, he was a strong personality, and he was a confident manager. He was also an effective manager and was approachable, despite having a strong personality. I think the UCOs sensed that he was supportive and therefore had confidence in him. He had a strong moral compass and would not accept people misbehaving. And again, does that accord with...
I have to respect their views.
And in terms of what you said earlier, was your concern that in that role, he was more concerned about, in fact, the welfare of the officers and
I felt he was more embedded. This is my interpretation. He was more embedded with the UCOs and their needs. And that's not just welfare, it's about the ongoing existence of the way in which they work, the way in which they're trained, budgeted, etc. He was not enthusiastic, and I felt he was not part of our management team, which is what I expected he would be, to help us manage the change we needed to do. I felt that he should have been the buffer between the two of us in the negotiation, because you're right, he was well respected and well liked, and it would have been really helpful if he had understood and gone with us on the change, and I think we would have then taken the UCOs with us. But I think we were then in a position of Frankie Flood and myself trying our best, but we had just lost the DI and any ability to communicate in a positive manner with the UCOs.
And just for completeness, because we have from HN35
Yes.
on your cipher list, we have in paragraph 63 of HN35 statement, HN35 stated, HN72 had very hands-on, supportive, proactive management style. He was bright, an ex-UCO himself, really knew what the role entailed. He would meet one-to-one with the UCOs. He was forthright when he needed to be. The welfare of the UCOs was non-negotiable for 72. He was trusted by the UCOs, and he and I had a good relationship. And so, again, would you agree it must have been clear from the UCO's perspective and the manager's perspective that you had a responsibility for him?
I think you've summed it up well. You know, he was very, very well liked by the UCOs and the cover officers. But I felt that as a DI, you bridged the gap between the needs of complying with MPS policy and change, but also the need to look after the welfare of your staff. He needed to bridge the two, and we just weren't getting that. I felt we were just getting a middle-ranking management team that were just basically giving the UCOs the sort of knowledge of, don't worry, we'll confront the superintendent and the DCI, and I don't think that was right. I think he should have been trying to bridge both, which is the needs of the UCO but the needs of the organisation.
I just want to explore John Boucher, who we'll hear evidence from tomorrow, but his input into this decision. I wonder if we can turn to his statement, and I'll just provide the URN. Whilst we're just locating the URN for that, can I just ask you about one document related to Hastings and how he was dealt with? Could we turn up, so it's your tab B78, it's MPS 0526770, and it's page 3 of this document. So perhaps if we just put it in context, if we can turn to the previous page. So this is a discussion document for the CPS meeting, and if we just, one of the things that is addressed is how it came about that he was arrested. So if we go to point 4, and it says this under point 4.
Is that on the other? Oh, there we are.
The information about the potential planned event at the Excel Centre was provided to police by this UC. Gold on the day was aware of this information, but not the source of the intelligence. There was a breakdown in communication between the manager of the UC and the team who made the decision to arrest the group and charge such a large number. This failure in communication resulted in charging of the UC. And then this, it says, this situation had not occurred previously and will not occur in the future as systems have now been implemented to ensure this will not happen again.
That's our view.
Because...
We're not aware of the history.
Because, so at the time, the only arrest and charge of a UCO that you were aware of was this one, DC Hastings.
I was aware, as I said before, at the G8, but this is the first time I'd been aware of an arrest and charge. It was only, as you know, when we did the closing down report that we found the extent of what had happened.
And so that was when your state of knowledge changed.
This is a genuine statement made by Frankie Flood and myself. It's what we thought at the time and what we knew at the time.
All right. We could take that down, please. And I think we can go now to John Boucher's witness statement, which is at UCPI 39425, please. Thank you. And could we turn to pages 113 and 114? So, again, in terms of exploring the precise circumstances in which HN72 came to leave his posting. So at paragraph 496 towards the bottom of page 113 of 160, can you see he says, my recollection is that I directed to DSU McKinney and DCI Flood that he was to be moved. And so does that ring a bell with you, that in fact there was a direction from John Boucher that DCI 72 should...
I mean, obviously,
DI
I can't speak for Mr. Boucher here, but my recollection is absolutely clear. I had lost confidence in the DI, and the DI said that he would leave. It's for Mr. Boucher to talk about the terminology here. So he may be just using a terminology knowing that he's being removed and supporting me in that decision. The word removal is probably the wrong word to use, but I'm not going to go into that. It's for Mr. Boucher.
Well, so he said, well, the next paragraph, the removal of DI 72, from my recollection, was in order to facilitate the change that was needed, remove a barrier to that change, and to assist with wider relationships with the unit. The events of late 2007 effectively crystallised the difference of approach to undercover deployments that existed between those known as evidential crime and intelligence-only undercover deployments.
I think Mr. Boucher makes a fair point. I do believe that I felt at the time, as did Frankie, that the removal of the DI and the bringing of Andy Horsley was our chance to still continue to make the change forward. So I think Mr. Boucher has correctly described that.
But correctly describe it. But what about at the time? Was this the sort of thoughts? Were these the thoughts that he was communicating to you, that 72 needs to be moved on?
No, he's not making that direction. He's my ultimate boss. He is the DCS. I would go to John Boucher. He was a very, and still is, a very experienced senior officer. So I will be telling him and briefing him fairly regularly, as will Frankie, around the issues. We've told him this, and I think it's absolutely clear to me that my thinking and Frankie's thinking is that with the DI gone and a new DI in there, hopefully we can bridge the gap with the communication required to take the UCOs through the change.
If we look at the next two paragraphs, just to complete this topic in John Boucher's statement, he says at paragraph 498, with regard to the events surrounding the arrest of DC Hastings, my recollection is that upon me hearing of the arrest and the lack of proper practice being followed, of me then directing DSU McKinney and DCI Flood to stop further deployments of the operative, it was this arrest, the lack of direction and control of the operatives' activities, and the wider resisted efforts of modernisation of the SDS, with operatives not agreeable to attending the new TAC course and the need to change the type of deployments, that led to me requesting temporary assistant clerk to agree to the withdrawal of all SDS operatives and deployments.
I think this isn't just in one time zone. But it's for Mr. Boucher. But I understand what he's saying. What he's effectively saying is that this, together with what then happened later on, which is the refusal of the officers to go on the NUTAC course, which happens fairly soon afterwards, was the culmination. So at that stage, I would have briefed Mr. Boucher that I believe that we have now come to the end of the road and there is no way that I can modernise this unit. It needs to be ended.
I wonder if we can take that down. I just want to briefly refer you to what HN72 has said about this in his statement. The particular passages, I wonder if we can turn... HN72's statement is MPS 0749345, and it's paragraph, if we begin at paragraph 400A, it's pages 184 and 185. and I mean, to some extent, we've addressed it. But can you see, for example, he sets out here, for example, small Roman 1, that he'd been on leave at a crucial time, and he wasn't due back until the Tuesday, and the Tuesday is when the arrest took place. And he describes how, if we go over the page, he'd learned of the arrest at 8 a.m. and then receives a call later that evening about the charge. And so again, just from his perspective, if he was here to say it, that, well, you know, he was due to be on leave that day, it was a quick charge, that he was not to blame for his actions. What would your response be to that?
I don't know who was on leave that day, etc. I can only deal with the facts as I've stated.
One of the things he says at paragraph 414 is that he says, I think I was acting consistently with prior practice.
And he says that in his statement, which is where, sorry?
Yeah, sorry. If we go to paragraph, 414. So it's page 193.
Ah, right, 414.
Yeah. So as I explained above, there was no indication of charge from Gold Liaison following the arrest. I think I was acting consistently with prior practice. And so the point he makes is that in terms of this, the sitting back and letting it run its course, the point he seems to make in his statement is that, well, I was acting consistently with prior SDS practice, and if the practice was wrong, he indicates that, well, others should have changed the practice.
The interesting point on that is, if he said that in his statement, why didn't he say that to us when we were actually talking to him about the incident? Why didn't he say then, actually, sir, I'm actually going with existing practice, and this is how we've always done it?
So what your evidence is that, well, that this is new, that he's saying that it is consistent with practice, with current practice.
If it was current practice, and he'd shown us what that current practice is at the time, and this has always happened, and he showed us where that policy is, then I think the route of travel of Frankie and myself would have been, right, well, this is never going to happen again, and it is definitely not going to happen in this case. And when has it happened before, and on how often, on how many occasions? Because yes, we do know later on that this has happened in the past, but at this stage, we're not alert to how often it's happened.
In terms of, just to give an example, and then we'll move from this topic, I wonder if we could just bring up on screen, so it's not in your bundle, it's MPS 0526753, and it's page 7 of this document. And so this is going back to 1997, so this is a number of years ago, and these are a series of file notes that address the topic where something similar happened, where an officer, Jim Boyling, was arrested, he was charged, and he also gave evidence. And you can see here we've got another DCI, Keith Edmondson, but if we look, for example, at paragraph 4, the way in which this topic is talked about, it says, however, in SDS terms, the whole event from 7th of August to the present day could not have come to a better conclusion. DC Boyling's operation has been strengthened by his involvement with this case, not least for the way in which he has been seen to stand his ground against the authorities. Certainly he is to be praised for the way in which he dealt with each of the court appearances, especially the final 3 days, when a total of 23 police witnesses could have been called. The fact that most of these would have been in or around the court during that time will have imposed considerable strain on him. Needless to say, DC Boyling dealt with these in his usual phlegmatic way. And just to conclude, DCI Edmondson's note, he said, this is just one more example of the professional way in which DC Boyling conducts himself as an SDS field officer. His continued involvement with Reclaim the Streets will provide this branch with intelligence of the highest calibre. And if we just go, for example, to page 4 of this document, we can see that Superintendent Docker's note minute to Detective Superintendent Roger Pearce, referring to this as a most satisfactory conclusion to this drawn-out affair, and once again highlights the professionalism and dedication of our SDS officers. I will speak to DC Boiling personally on my next visit to the unit, but this is, of course, to speak to him personally, to congratulate him. And so in terms of what HN72 said in his statement, that essentially he acted in accordance with previous SDS practice. And the point I want to explore to you is, wasn't the fault of the arrest and charge of DC Hastings not necessarily personal to HN72, but just reflective of standard SDS practice over, decades?
Should never have happened. It is unprofessional. Obviously, it's a matter for Mr. Edmondson and Mr. Docker to explain how they feel that it's acceptable to mislead a court. I don't find that at all professional. I think it's totally wrong. And yes, we became aware of it after we looked at all these documents in our closing down report. But at that time, in our knowledge, this is unacceptable.
You had no hesitation in criticising that practice. To what extent was the fact that you came into the SDS without any previous special branch and certainly no SDS experience, to what extent did that assist you in looking at what had been...
I'd been a police officer since 1983, and I was more than aware as a police officer, right from the day I went to Hendon, that you do not mislead a court. And I'm surprised that any officer feels that they can mislead a court by appearing in a false name or a false identity, let alone the legal privilege aspects.
This is one example. It's not unique, as you know from the closing down report. Could you assist us with what your view is as to how the SDS slipped into practices such as this, practices which made arrests and charges not matters for closing down the units, not for a DI to essentially lose his job, but to be the opposite, to be something that UCOs are congratulated on in reinforcing their legends and managing not to be caught out?
I think that's a really good question. And to answer it is, I personally believe that for reasons unbeknown to me, a culture existed, and that culture seemed to say that this kind of behaviour was acceptable. I wasn't aware of that in the police service. It was a culture that was alien to myself and Frankie Flood, but we accept, for some reason, or reasons known to these individuals, they felt that this kind of culture was acceptable. We didn't.
Can we take that document down? I want to ask you about a discrete topic, and that's of financial again. It's in relation to overtime. When in your tenure did you essentially tune into this practice of UCOs charging significant amounts of time for overtime? What's your recollection of that being an issue of concern?
Trying to remember dates. I think once the whole issue over working time regulations came in, and I'm sorry, I don't know the exact dates.
I don't know whether this will assist you with dates, but I wonder if you can just bring up a document. It's one drafted by DSU Fuller, albeit before you began as DCI. It's MPS 0527011 at your tab B43. So it's page 6. So, statement of expectation, not expecting you to read the entire document, but you can see that this is DSU Fuller saying at paragraph 2, I am putting together a statement of expectations for SDS officers, which will cover pay and conditions, postings at the conclusion of their SDS deployment, confidentiality agreement, and operational requirements. I need your advice with relation to leave and overtime. And I think if we turn to page 3 of this document, so we can then see that your handwritten note to DCI Flood, read 2 above, please
correct.
Could you take this forward? And
he did.
And he did.
He did take it forward. Frankie briefed me continuously on this. He spent a lot of time engaging with SCD, the National Undercover Working Group, etc., to try and find best practice or how this was being managed in other areas. It was very, very complicated, and I'm trying to remember the different responsible units in the MPS pay branch, but we had to find an acceptable level whereby we would be compliant with policy, but also the consent of the officers, because the whole issue over time on duty, when you were on duty, is very difficult to reconcile the European Court of Working Hours together with when an officer is on duty and not on duty. And as I recall, Frankie came back with an argued position in relation to overtime. And what it was basically saying is that it could be in negotiation, depending upon the kind of deployment, the hours would be worked out, but it never got finalised. There were meetings, as I recall, with the Federation, etc. From memory, unless you can tell me otherwise, I don't think we resolved it at this stage. By the closure, I don't think we'd resolved it. And I think it was another thorny issue for the UCOs.
If we take that down, could we just turn to another document, so at your tab B90, it's MPS 0749170. This is a meeting note. You didn't attend this meeting, but I just want to ask you about it.
Right.
So this is a meeting with John Boucher and Frankie Flood and the new DI, Andy Horsley, who took over from HN72.
Yep.
And so, in effect, there is a suggestion. I wonder if we can just go. Well, we can see the second paragraph. The SDS officers called in DC a few weeks ago, re their work and overtime. The officers were consulted, and the overtime was to be cut by 55%.
That's correct.
Spoke with Julian McKinney, who has concerns of resignation of majority of the officers within the SDS, and the Constables Federation rep is willing to consult, negotiate the conditions within SDS and outside the SDS. So this seems to indicate that there was something specific and clear communicated to the UCOs, i.e. a 55% cut.
That sounds exactly. I remembered 45%, but 55 is has the 5. These officers, as I recall, I think we were guaranteeing them 135 hours a month, I think, under the old policy. As a result of the excellent work that Frankie had done and best practice that he'd discovered, he came to the conclusion that the right amount was 55%. But obviously I haven't got his documents, etc., as to how he came to that conclusion. But it was clear to me that I felt that there would be a significant reaction to this by the UCOs.
And do you actually remember that reaction, or in terms of the... Of course, this is towards the end of the SDSs.
We're getting to the end now, and it is. We're trying to make everything compliant. We are, to be honest, failing to get the recommendations in place. The SDS view, or what I'm getting the feeling from Frankie, is basically we want to carry on working the way we're working. That's how we've always worked, and that's been our system. We're saying you can't do that. You have to be compliant, and this is what's going to happen. And we are prepared for a mass resignation.
You had been in the Metropolitan Police since 1983.
Yes.
Could you help us with an idea of the pay that these UCOs received in comparison with other similar ranks, or just so we have a clearer impression as to how high their pay
I
was?
don't know any
All right.
that got pay this high.
I'll ask
135 hours is, what do you think? It's a 40-hour week? So you're talking about a normal working week, month is 160, I think, if my maths is right. The calculation on this wouldn't be at time, it would be at time and a third. They're getting double their salaries, around about. And I don't think we were even paying on-call firearms officers, etc., the level of overtime we were paying here. But I accept it is a difficult subject because the officers were being deployed, and whilst they had a mobile phone on, effectively the argument is we're always on duty. I accept, and that was our difficulty.
To what extent, if any, did you consider that as a contributory factor to the length of the deployments? So we have seen examples of deployments that looked as though they were going to be coming to an end, and then the UCOs wanted them to be extended. What was the pay level, the amount being paid to them, such that it provided an incentive to extend their own deployments? Was that ever a factor?
I have a memory, but I cannot draw you to a reference document, etc. But I have a memory of an officer being concerned about his interest payments or something about things that he was buying that would now make it very difficult for him. But I just cannot remember the exact example. But I do feel that earning this kind of money would be a contributory factor to continue on the operation. But that's just a feeling. I have no evidence to support that view.
All right. Jumping back to just before you started in the SDS, is it something that DSU Fuller ever mentioned to you about pay, overtime?
No, I don't remember the finances coming out. I don't even know if DSU Fuller knew the extent of the overtime, but that wasn't one of the key issues at the beginning.
Right. Another topic, could we please take this document down? And can we please bring up on screen MPS 0527121? So this is not in the bundle, this document. And if we just turn over the page. And I wonder if we can have pages 3 next to page 4 on screen. Now, when Simon Wellings provided his evidence, he was asked about this particular document, and it was referred to as the value for money note. Mm-hmm. And he described how he had conversations with HN72, and his evidence was that HN72 asked him to produce a document essentially setting out the highlights why the SDS was good value for money. And he described that this document, it was originally in a table, there were more examples. And he also explained that this document seemed to be edited and added to. So he described it as sort of gilding the lily. And one of the examples that he gave, you can see under Ariel Sharon, he gave evidence of a purported plan for someone to dress up in a fake suicide vest and to approach Ariel Sharon during his visit. And there's a disagreement of evidence in relation to the veracity of that or otherwise. But one of the things that Simon Welling said was that there was detail in this document, this value for money document, that was added to, for example, details about the fake suicide vest. And he was told that the circumstance in which this document was produced was HN72 are essentially asking him to produce something that would be a case for the continuation of the SDS. Now, from his perspective, he described an occasion where he was picked up in the car by HN72 from his Duff address. And with about 15 minutes' notice, he said he was driven to you, that you were in a building in Stockwell, and that at the very last minute, HN72 says, right, go into that building. Here's a few pieces of paper, including a document either the same or similar to this, essentially asking him to present the case for the continuation of the SDS to you. And the way in which HN118 Simon Willings described that meeting was, it was almost like, right, state your case. Now, from your perspective, we have 118 Simon Willings' evidence that he was driven by HN72 to meet you. Can you remember that meeting with Simon Willings at all?
I certainly didn't work in Stockwell. I'm trying to think what kind of building I'd have been in Stockwell. I mean, I have a memory of this incident because it was one that the SDS had told me about, one of their greatest successes of basically how they prevented this. So I remember that incident being described to me.
He said, in fact, he didn't use this document. He just kept this in his pocket, but he did describe.
Somebody told me about it.
Well, he said, Simon Willings said that he described it to you, so he's as an example. But is that something you recall? Because sounds...
I remember the story, but I don't recall the meeting at all.
Unusual for a UCO to suddenly present the case for value for money.
I mean, Simon Willings is one of the officers I thought had the highest of, honesty and integrity. It's his version of events. It's not my memory. But I don't have the memory of it. And it's weird that somebody would get pushed out of a car, come and have a meeting with me in some discreet building in Stockwell, and I look at some kind of value for money document. I just have a memory of it.
Oh, if we can take that down. But on the topic of 118, in his statement, and we needn't pull it up, but I'll give the reference at pages 97 to 98, paragraphs 267 to 268. This is what he said. After my deployment ended, I had no significant period of leave or time to adjust. I effectively finished my deployment on the Thursday or Friday before Christmas. Just pausing there, this is Christmas 2007, so right at the end. I finished my deployment on the Thursday or Friday before Christmas, took my piercings out, got a decent haircut and bought some presents, and then went to work at police premises on the Monday following the New Year holiday. And then he says, when my deployment ended, I was not debriefed by anyone. I was seen as tainted by my 7 years with the SDS. And then he said at least one senior officer told me that I was damaged goods and nobody wanted anything to do with me. When he was giving evidence, he was taken to that passage and he was asked, well, who was the officer that described you as damaged goods? And he referred to you. Does that ring any bells? So
doesn't ring any bells.
Simon Bell's coming.
And I'm
Simon
surprised at what he describes as sort of like leaving on the Friday, working the Monday. Frankie Flood was one of the most considerate leaders you could ever have the privilege of working under. Frankie would have really cared about these officers and the impact it was having on them. I think that's very unfair to Frankie, who would have managed their transition back, even accepting that they wanted to go. But it's his recollection and, sorry, not Frankie's recollection, it's obviously the recollection of Simon, and we just have to accept that.
Something else that he said, Simon Welling said in his statement, and the reference is page 99, paragraph 272, he said this: any welfare services that were available to former UCOs within the NPS probably evaporated when the unit closed.
No.
I do not recall DCI Flood having any consideration for our welfare. or he would not have prevaricated over the unit's closure and would have been a little more honest and upfront to the UCOs about the prospects for the SDS as a unit within SO15 CTC, and well as about the future employability of individual UCOs. So it says you can hear the emotion in the
Very
in that
unfair
paragraph.
criticism, and I think that is really unfair. Again, Frankie and I discussed this, and in fact, Frankie led on this. He talked me through his whole strategy. You know, I think it wasn't just about offering welfare support to the officers, but it was welfare support to their families. Again, I've got a nominal number I could refer you to. You know, we nominated an individual, DS, to be the point of contact. We continued to show real concern for these officers and their welfare, right through all the compromises, etc. And I think it's really unfair criticism of Frankie that he showed a lack of regard. He would have had total and utter care for those officers.
I wonder if we can just pull up another document. It's MPS 0738049, so this is your tab B98, on that topic of welfare. So this is a note of an interview conducted by Operation Hearn with Dr. Ian Palmer. And it's quite a lengthy note of the interview. I wonder if we can go to page 4. Dr. Ian Palmer, is he someone that you recall, or his role?
I do recall his role as a psychologist, welfare. Sir.
And so if we go, we can see, can you see the careers heading? If we just expand that paragraph or under careers.
I can see that, sir.
So he,
Yeah.
yes. So he says each individual understood that work within the SDS meant with removal from the normal world of policing, their colleagues and indeed their families to some extent. However, they did so on the understanding that they would be looked after and to a large extent protected on their return to the branch. And then Dr. Palmer stated this: when I joined the team, the management were very supportive and arranged specific routes for officers' reintegration. However, in the latter years, after the arrival of Frankie Flood and the creation of SO15, this safety net was removed and officers were not protected. They returned to a unit which did not appear to understand or respect them in the way that Special Branch had done beforehand. In contrast, their peers were able to progress with their careers and personal lives. Reintegration was therefore difficult. I just want to give you an opportunity to respond to what is set out here, essentially the account that Dr. Ian Palmer gave to Hearn.
Clearly, Dr. Palmer is a very professional individual, and therefore one respects his comments. My question would be, who told him that the safety net had been removed and officers were not protected? Is it something that he had seen himself and been briefed about, or was this information that he was getting back from the UCOs? I know Frankie really well, and I know that he never removed that safety net from those officers. He would have protected them through and through, and would continue to protect them. But obviously, I can't answer for Dr. Palmer where he got that information. But it doesn't reflect the character I know in Frankie Flood.
One of the things that's stated there is it refers to the creation of SO15, so the SO12, SO13
Correct.
merger in October 2006. Before we have mid-afternoon break, may I just, if we take this document down, I just want to ask you about something that HN53 stated. It's reflected in Operation Hearn notes. It is not in the bundle, but it's MPS 0723181. So these, again, are Operation Hearn notes of a meeting with HN53 on the 8th of November 2013. And I wonder if we can just turn to page 4 in this document. And can you see about 4 or 5 sentences in, can you see the amalgamation with SO13? So this is HN53 through Operation Hearn, saying the amalgamation with SO13 affected everything. It destroyed continuity. Management style after I left was part of the reason for the collapse of the unit. It was the first time non-branch had run the unit. I continually asked Frankie Flood and Julian McKinney to read Magma. They weren't interested. And then it goes on to a different topic. So again, in terms of chiming with what Dr. Palmer said about the merger into SO15, what's your response to that criticism there, principally of you, but also Frankie Flood?
There's two questions there. One, the management style, after he left, was the reason for the collapse of the unit. There was significant resistance to the merger of SO12 Special Branch and the Anti-Terrorist Branch. It was very, very emotional. And maybe Mr. Boucher will detail that more tomorrow, so I will leave that matter for him. But it was very emotional. Yes, we were the first non-branch individuals to come in, but that should not have made a difference. Operation Magma, well, I think he raises this in 2013, I think you just said. We'd already raised Magma, and I was raising Magma as Frankie was raising Magma back in 2010, 2011. So he's about 3 years sort of out of date here. And I hope if he mentioned it to Hearn, Hearn took that seriously and went to look at Operation Magma.
Right. So I see the time. I don't know whether that's convenient for a mid-afternoon break.
Certainly. 10 minutes? 10 minutes.
Mr. McKinney, just some individual points. We were referring to Laurie Ford's report, and you were querying the precise time that the actual report was produced. Doing the best that we can, we've come up with the date of the 3rd of October 2007. Does that sound right?
It sounds right, because I remember the dates were very close to each other.
Before we did break, I was asking you about something that HN53 said
That's
in
correct.
his Hearn interview in 2013, and the point that he made was that he kept on asking you and DCI Flood to read Operation Magma. And in terms of the timing of that, again, we don't have a precise date, but from HN53's evidence, but the suggestion is that not in 2013 when the Hearn interview with him took place, but much earlier, that he broached you and DCI Flood with a request to read that report. Does that...
I can't remember him actually approaching us to read it. What I do remember is at some stage, we've got the paperwork of Magma. The paperwork of Magma, when I closed the unit down, my orders to my then staff officer was to seize everything, retain all the paperwork, and bring it over to the new location, computer, etc. As Officer A's allegations are being made, I'm obviously also aware, and this is about 2010, I think we're in about March 2010, roundabout. Frankie is talking to me about the closing down report, which I think, because it was a long, detailed report, is being completed sometime around mid-2009. I'm then aware that Officer A is making his allegations, and I'm obviously trying to think, well, where are these allegations coming from? And of course, I've put 2 and 2 together and it's got to be the Officers A and B, the psychological thing. I've then obviously spoken to one of my officers and discovered that we hold material called Operation Magma. I've then had that operation brought down to my office, and I then spent, I'd say, a good few days reading into it because it was quite lengthy. So I read the statements of Officers A and B.
Just to pause you there. Yep. When you read those statements and Officer A's statement, did you then realise that there had been sexual relationships with the reference to that?
Everything is there. I was in shock. The revelations by Officer A, in particular, covered a multitude of areas from relationships to criminality. It was a lot of issues in there. The big question for me is, how was this managed? I then read the Gold Group minutes, and of course it's at that stage that I'm obviously seeing the reference to the Lawrence campaign, the Richard Walton famous minute of nothing must go on paper. And I'm looking at it going, this does not look at all good. This is not good. At that stage, I'm also receiving more at the same time Frankie's minutes up to the DCS for the attention of AXO. And in his minute, if you have that, I think it's about the bottom of the second page, he draws inference that in that report, I don't think he used the word Operation Magma, but he says Magma needs to be revisited and reviewed in light of the issues that are currently coming out from Officer A. And I'm highly supportive of that position because I now believe that Operation Magma and the work that's coming out from Frankie's minute in 2010 now needs professional standards to do a full and in-depth investigation into what has happened, including the Tradecraft Manual, etc.
Were you informed of any decision by the Directorate of Professional Standards to open an investigation into sexual relationships by UCOs?
No. My memory of it is that, in fact, Frankie was getting really concerned about it because we were not getting an answer back in relation to the closing down report. We know that it had gone up in the direction of AXO. And Frankie was really keen to get an answer back that these matters were going to be fully investigated. I think we then start to move into, but all we can do is refer it upwards. We then start to move towards, I think, the latter part of the year, and I'm trying to get the dates right here. We're moving into the disclosure exercise around the charging of Norris, etc., with the murder of Stephen Lawrence. I then get a contact from AXO, Cressida Dick, that we must do everything possible to find any relevant material that undermines the case of the Crown. In this case, anything there, even if it's questionable, we need to disclose to the disclosure officer. I then said to my DI, who was working for me at the time, what material do we hold in our CHIS unit? And it's at that stage that we find the reporting by Windmill
Tilter. HN81.
As a result of the Windmill Tilter, obviously we then do the disclosure exercise, but my DI comes to me with concerns relating to Windmill Tilter's reporting and possibly other material that we may hold. It's at that stage that I do another report, which I think went up to AXO. And in that report, from memory, and I don't think we found that report, or we may have done, because there's another report I do later on in October, but in that report, I think I have, this is my memory, and it is a pretty good memory of it. I go through the contact sheets of Windmill Tilter, bearing in mind it's pre-Ripper, and I'm reviewing it to the standard of Ripper as opposed to pre-Ripper. And what I'm drawing to the attention of AXO is that when I read the contact sheets, it is my opinion as an experienced authorising officer, and I have been for a number of years, that we're not dealing with collateral intrusion, we're dealing with status drift. I don't think there's any intention. I think the officer was correctly deployed, etc. But we are over-reporting on areas that we shouldn't be reporting on.
Now, you already gave an example of some of the names, such as
Yes,
Trevor Phillips, Suresh Grover.
That's another report.
Okay.
That's a report in October.
Okay.
I haven't got a copy of this first report, so I don't know where that went. But what I'm highlighting in there is that I think magma is an issue, and I can't remember the dates because we're now getting a lot of the compromises that are coming out. I've had a meeting, Frank and I had a meeting with professional standards. I'm telling professional standards at this stage that actually you've already got a scoping scenario for the issues. It's in Operation Magma, and Frankie's obviously given them his report in relation to the closing down. So the view that I am taking is actually you have sufficient material here in which to launch an investigation. I'm not aware of how that's managed, but during that process I think we have two different goal groups, and I think Hearn gets invited in, and they then start to investigate, and that's sort of my memory there. I keep flagging up magma because for me magma is a major area of concern.
I've got some short additional topics I just want to ask you about. In terms of inappropriate reporting names such as Trevor Phillips and Suresh Grover, Michael Mansfield at KC, is that a name that's featured?
Rings a bell. Suresh Grover rings a bell, Dwayne Brooks. They're all high-profile individuals.
And would you put that in the category of inappropriate reporting?
I think all the names I put on my report I felt were inappropriate. I mean, there's Harry Stanley, Brian Douglas, which are obviously, I presume, are campaigns as opposed to the individuals. But they all raise alarm bells with me.
If this point were to be made to you in relation, again, going back to HN72, that one of the reasons that he did not refer at the time to you and Frankie Flood of the practice of the SDS in relation to how to treat arrests and charges, that he assumed that you would have been aware of the policy. What would you say to the suggestion that you should have checked or improved the policy? regarding arrests and charge. In other words, how would you respond to the suggestion that you and or Frankie Flood should have been explicit in setting out a policy in relation to how to handle UCOs to avoid arrests?
If they'd attended the NUTAC course, that would have been one of the themes that they would have learnt on that course. And therefore, and probably Frankie took the view that if they had done a bespoke designed internal course, that issue would have been dealt with in a similar manner to the way that it would be advised to them on the NUTAC course.
A different topic, Ken Livingstone.
I recall that name.
When he was mayor, did you have any discussions with him related to SDS and the financing of the SDS?
No.
Were you aware of any reporting on him?
I think his name comes up, but I'm pretty certain his name comes up, but I can't remember which report it was.
Are you aware of any particular direction that you or those under your command gave in relation to the reporting on or dissemination of information about elected politicians? Did that topic arise at any point?
I don't remember it coming up at all. It was never authorised. When I looked at the authorities by the authorising officers, there was never any authority given by any authorising officer for the targeting, reporting of any of the politicians, campaign groups, etc. This was, as I said before, it was status drift. It was, for some reason, the officers were bringing this material back.
And what should the guidance have been? If you gave example earlier in your evidence where you were asked by a UCO, well, what happens if I'm blocking a road with my bicycle? If you had been asked, well, what do I do when I come across a politician giving a speech or in the context of a demonstration, how do I approach that individual in my reporting? What would your answer be?
I thought I sort of covered that earlier. If the group in which he is infiltrating are going to that meeting, it would be unusual for him not to go to a meeting or a presentation where a politician is giving a speech, a lawful speech as part of the MP's normal day's work. Therefore, he would come back and report that he was at the meeting. However, this is where the filter process should occur, that he should be told in no uncertain terms, we'll carry on going to the meeting because that's what the group is doing, that's what you're authorised to do, but you are not authorised to write down any reports, log anything, and nothing should be disseminated and recorded.
I wonder if we can bring up on screen, please. So it's at your tab B68. It's MPS 0526936, page 12 of the bundle of documents there. And if we wonder if we can just expand it. The inquiry have identified this as the last cancellation of authority. It relates to the cancellation of HN79's authority. So it says, I hereby cancel the authority for use and conduct granted on the 13th of August 2007, which authorised UCO Hawthorne Ridge to infiltrate individuals and associates in right-wing group. And we can see it's 12:45 p.m. on the 11th of January 2008. And it's the name there is Peter Clark, so DAC Clark. Can you help us with why he would be signing off this cancellation? Was it anything to do with the fact that this was effectively the end of the SDS with the cancellation of the last UCO authority?
I'm trying to remember the dates. John McDowell was my commander at the time, and John McDowell was one of the most experienced authorising officers in the country, but he was suffering an illness at that time. So therefore, I wonder if Mr. Clark was stepping in for Mr. McDowell, either being not able to sign it off or being absent. But Mr. Clark would have been the next senior officer in line. But I don't know.
And in terms of the mechanics of the closing down, so closure of premises, officers returning documentation, return of police equipment.
Yep.
Is that something you delegated, or
I
to what
delegated.
extent were you hands-on with
I delegated that to an individual, my staff officer, and I gave him the parameters of what I wished him to do, which is close everything down, all accounts, etc., all backstops, legends, etc., and retain all paperwork, computer systems, etc., and bring them to a new secure location. And I asked him to do me an overview report of what the new unit would look like. I wanted to retain the same personnel.
One of the things that you said earlier in your evidence was that when the various sexual relationships when that came to your attention, that you were quite shocked by that. And one of the names that you mentioned was Bob Lambert.
Correct.
TBS is the cipher that we have given to the biological son of Bob Lambert, who had a relationship with the person we're calling Jackie whilst he was deployed as a UCO in the 1980s.
Correct.
I want to ask you about some email correspondence related to TBS. And in doing so, I wonder if we can just bring up on screen, it's an NPCC number. It's NPCC 3051550. So this is not in your bundle. And I just want to ask you about these emails. And so to do so, I think if we can just turn to the second page of this document. So the bottom, if we can have the bottom of this page, but also the top of page 3, side by side. So it's principally about email correspondence on the 24th of October 2011. Now, this first email I'm going to bring to your attention, you're not copied in. It's from Bob Lambert to Rob Evans, the Guardian journalist, and he says Rob, thanks for handling the TBS issue discreetly. As I said on the phone, I am TBS's father, or to put it another way, Bob Robinson was TBS's father. His mother was an animal rights activist in the 1980s, and in 1987 she married and she and her husband adopted TBS, and I've not heard from her or TBS since then. TBS may have the same hereditary sudden arrhythmic death syndrome SADS my daughter and son Privacy died from. TBS needs to be located, seen and monitored by Professor Privacy at St George's Hospital in Tooting as soon as possible. And then in bold, achieving that goal without compromising TBS's or his mother's privacy and integrity is my priority, and I seek your cooperation. Would you ask the Guardian editor if I could discuss this issue with him? Yesterday, I revealed to my family the secret of my relationship with Jenny, the name used in your published report last night. Now, just to pause there, Jenny is the name that was given by Rob Evans to Belinda Harvey.
Okay.
So yesterday, I revealed to my family the secret of my relationship with Jenny, the name used in your published report last night, and the fact that I had also fathered a child called TBS in another relationship. I did not report either relationship to my police supervisors at the time. In the circumstances, I think I should explain my misconduct to the Met and the IPCC before the Guardian. I would like you to consider publishing the following response to your report of Jenny's account as soon as possible. And then he sets out a potential apology to be printed, and he ends it. Look forward to hearing from you, Bob. Now, if we go to the page 1 in this document, so if we go back to page 1, please. Now, on the bottom left-hand corner, this is an email from Peter Ward. So it's the same dates. This is the same morning. So that previous email we were looking at was 7:55 a.m. This is now 10:22 a.m. And we can see that Pete Ward sends this to a number of individuals, including Cressida Dick, but also you. So you're in receipt of this email. and the subject is Guardian disclosure. And Peter Ward says, colleagues, just bringing this to your attention in case it is media before our meeting this afternoon. Former DI Lambert is now speaking to The Guardian. In his email below to their journalist Robert Evans, he alludes to at least two sexual relationships. One was a lady called Jenny Backle, so this is Belinda Harvey, and a second was a female activist who D.I. Lambert fathered a child with. Two of D.I. Lambert's children that he had with his real wife have died prematurely with a congenital hereditary condition, sudden arithmetic death syndrome, SADS. The media now know of this, and Lambert is concerned that the activist child called TBS should be tested for the same condition. Lambert has had several emails from me recommending, I think it's supposed to say, he does not speak to the media of the former DC we think is briefing the media. He has chosen to ignore the recommendation, and then that is signed off by Peter Ward. Now, if we go to the top of the page, now this is your reply to that email, although that you were copied into. So we can see your name at the top, and by this time it's the same date, 24th of October 2011, 1:33, and you send it back to Peter Ward and the others, including Cressida Dick, and you refer to it as follow-up, and you put on a flag, a red flag, so you can see it says flag status red, and you say, Pete, I am not at the Gold Group meeting, but on reading the content below, in particular the possible serious life-threatening illness that his son TBS may have, I think we should now consider whether our knowledge now places an Osman obligation on us. Now, pausing there, in terms of, can you just explain what you mean by Osman obligation?
An Osman warning is when we hold material that we believe would have a significant threat to life on an individual, regardless of where we get the information from, we have a duty to inform that person that there is a risk. It doesn't mean we have to tell them where the intelligence is from, etc., but we have a duty. Obviously, I have to accept that the Gold Group is far more knowledgeable than me because they are meeting far more people than I am, and therefore they are obviously seeing the bigger picture in relation to this. I felt that I just wanted to be absolutely 100% certain that those individuals on the Gold Group were very aware that I felt we needed to, as quickly as possible, inform TBS stroke mother of the issue.
And we can see, because the emails record the timing, so it's a little over 3 hours after being copied into that email, you send a follow-up. There's an email that has a follow-up flag, a red status flag, and the reference to Osman you put in capital letters there.
And I think I'm saying this really, I'm trying to reflect back 20 years. I think I'm saying this really because we have the responsibility, but we are relying on third parties to pass this information on. That's not to say those third parties aren't going to do it, and I'm sure Mr. Evans of The Guardian would do everything he possibly can, so I'm not making any. I just want to be 100% certain that we are covering our responsibility.
Now, I wonder if we can take that down, and can we please bring up, there's another document not in the bundle, but it's MPS 0749743. So these are the notes from the Gold Group meeting that you're not attending. It's that same day, so it would have been after your email. And I wonder if we can turn to page 4 of this. Well, let's just look at the first page first, please, sorry, which will be page 2, so we can a few further questions.
Yes.
May I put them? Mr. McKinney, in terms of the SDS closing report, so that's dated the 25th of June 2009, and you referred to, of course, the setting up of gold groups, Operation Soissons that became Operation Hearn. But in terms of the referral to the Department for Professional Standards, can you explain why no further action was done in relation to that, in that gap? So the gap between the closing report and the gold groups and Operation Soissons and Hearn being taken up. So in terms of the complaints that were made, that nothing was done in relation to them.
All I can look at is the minute from Frankie Flood, which I think is from memory March 2010. So that's obviously when Frankie has had a good chance to read through the report. What the delay is between July and the period that Frankie looked through it, I don't know the answer to that question. Clearly, when you look at the minute from Frankie in 2010, he's obviously grabbed hold of it quickly, because I think that's around about the time that Officer A's allegations are coming out, I think. And therefore, he's obviously then submitted that report straight up, because he believes that as a result of that report, which I presume he's now read or read a month or two before, it's significantly important.
In terms of the closing report itself, it doesn't mention or refer to the use of deceased children's identities. Did that, as a tradecraft legend building method, did that come to your attention in any way in relation to how the SDS had historically operated?
I think I was aware that it had happened, but I think it was, I can't remember date-wise when I knew, before that report, after that report, etc. But I think I'm quite satisfied it was not happening during my period of time, but I'm not sure when it ceased. I can't remember.
And in broad terms, were you aware of it happening, for example, in the NPIU?
Again, I can't remember when I knew that information, whether it was before or after, but I do recall that that had been something that had been done.
And in terms of your response to that tactic, what was your response to learning about it?
Should never have happened. Obviously, those at that stage, at that time, felt that that particular tactic, strategy of backstop was appropriate. Clearly, it's not appropriate.
Different
But
topic.
I can't talk for those individuals.
Returning to Ken Livingstone again, did you, with the benefit of hindsight, do you think it was inappropriate that he was not notified earlier in relation to reporting that named him?
He should never have been named in the first place. And I personally feel that if a thorough investigation had taken place, once we knew the extent of what had happened, it would have been far more advisable for us to declare to those individuals what had happened. Whether it was innocent or non-innocent, I believe that we should have had that disclosure, but I have to accept the decision of those that manage the process.
Could we please bring up on screen MPS 0526935, page 81 of 0526935, please. This is, we will expand it, a Rob Hastings authorisation, and the words I'm looking for beginning significantly CW has identified.
Oh, here, I found it. Third last paragraph.
Thank you. Significantly
CW has identified two anarchist activists. Oh, I've lost it now.
Well, if we just read it out. Significantly, CW, so Rob Hastings, has identified two anarchist activists, Emily Apple and Privacy. who have have launched a campaign called Fit Watch, intending to disrupt and ultimately prevent the use of police forward intelligence team officers. The main effort has been simply to obstruct Fit's evidence gatherers and photographers. However, intelligence has provided that there are aspirations to discover Fit officers' personal details with a view to targeting their homes and families. There are also efforts to recruit activists to the cause. In her evidence to the inquiry, Emily Apple made it clear that the assertion that there were aspirations to discover the personal details of forward intelligence team officers with a view to targeting their homes and families was a false assertion, and when HN18 was questioned, he said that he didn't report on FitWatch in relation to that inclusion in an authorisation. Do you accept that there has been here inaccuracies included?
I have to accept what you say. I accept what you say if you've done the research.
So I have no further questions.
Is there any re-examination? No. Just one question in conclusion. Your senior officer, John Boucher, took the decision to close the SDS in November 2007, according to his evidence, and I have no reason to doubt it. In your witness statement, you said that you agreed with that decision for the reasons that he gave. May I take it that that remains your position?
It was my recommendation to John Boucher, and I was grateful that Mr. Boucher supported my recommendation.
We shall hear from him tomorrow.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for your evidence and giving it in this public arena.
Thank you very much, sir.
Tomorrow will be the last day of our public hearings in this building. The only further public hearings under my chairmanship will be remote. Whether or not there will be any others remains to be seen.
Thank you, sir.
Until tomorrow at 10.